Good evening, everyone. I think I've pressed the record button. Yes, I have. So welcome along for this week. Last week was good. We got a lot of feedback, a lot of really positive feedback. So massive thanks for that. And it motivated me and us to do some more, because it's not just me that does these bits and bobs for nationalhotrod.com and the Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, etc. There's a little team of volunteers behind the scenes. So since last week, we've named the podcast. Well, I named it, actually. That was not a group decision. Just called Past, Present and Future, because that's exactly what it is. You know, sometimes we're going to talk about the past. Sometimes we're going to talk about what's going on now, like we did last week with Sean. And sometimes, no doubt, we'll look into the future and try and predict some future world champions and things like that. So I thought it was appropriate. So this is episode 2. I've added a light to my desk, so now you can see my lovely face, because it was a bit dark last time, although I'm getting a bit of a shine on the head. So in terms of the team, tonight's guests aren't really guests, they're co-hosts, because going forward, we really want to bring this podcast to you every week. And once the pubs reopen, I've got some catching up to do with my local pub. So I will be out of action for a couple of months, I reckon. So I need we need some other people involved, and my voice is quite dull as well. So we're also going to do different formats. We've got loads of ideas, and loads of you out there have come up with ideas as well. So we're going to trial some of those. So last week we obviously had a one-to-one with a driver, a current National Hot Rod driver. We're going to be doing more of that. Don't worry about that. If you enjoyed that, great. Equally, you might enjoy tonight and think this is better or whatever. But either way, vice versa, there'll be something for you to catch up with. And we'll probably try and do a live thing as well, because we've realised that, well, I've realised there's a button that says live to Facebook, live to YouTube, so we could do live at some point as well. So that's good. I'm going to do a bit of a shout out to Speedwith TV. It's not something, they've not sponsored me to say this or made me say it by any means. But if you like this stuff that we do here, you'll love Speedwith TV. It's a really professional, proper, well-produced, TV that you can subscribe to. I subscribe, and if you like National Hot Rods and oval racing, you can fill your boots on there. It's 12 quid a month, which a lot of people say, well, that's more expensive than Netflix. Well, I think it's about the same, actually. But my thought is that on Netflix, probably 90% of what's on Netflix is not something that you personally want to watch, because it's built for everyone. Whereas, you know, on Speedwith TV, 90% of what's on there you'll want to watch. So in my book, maybe man maths in that, but in my book, that makes it well worth watching. So have a look, take your pick. But I just wanted to let you know about that, because I don't think that many people know about Speedwith TV. So moving on to tonight, different subject, but my two guests, as I said, aren't really guests, they're co-hosts, and we're just going to be discussing National Hot Rods. I've come up with a subject. These two co-hosts are people who've been in and around National Hot Rods for many years, been involved at various different levels over the years, to being really integrated into National Hot Rods and the organisation of it, to just simply being fans like a lot of us are. So their knowledge of the sport is very good. Their knowledge of what the fans think of the sport and what the fans think of drivers and everything else is second to none. So I've got my first guest tonight is Brian Oliver. Hello Brian. There you go. And Garry Staines, who's managed to dig out an old bit of hoarding.
It's stolen. It's nice to grab it out again. I think last time I used it, I was interviewing drivers, and obviously it's nice to be in the company of another driver who seems to be better at presenting than he was at driving, or is at driving. So, he's doing a great job. It's good to be also to be asked to sort of be a host as well, because I think we've all got, like Brian, we've got some great ideas with the future, and we're going to mix it up. So what we got tonight,
spread the load, because you know, we've gone through phases, you know, over the years where you know, different people have got involved and then, you know, had other commitments in life, and so we're trying to create a good solid team where we can share the load, and it's not all down to one person to do everything. We can all do it together, and it's purely about promoting our sport and hopefully reigniting the love, either reigniting or igniting the love that you may have for National Hot Rods. And hopefully we'll see at the track sometime soon, which I'm hoping there'll certainly be like a bit of a backlash to this lockdown, and everyone will just start turning up and really getting involved in watching the racing, because it'd be so nice just to go out and do something. I'm desperate to go out and do stuff, because, you know, it's go to work. Luckily, I do go to work, and I still got work to go to, but it's work and then it's home and sleep, work and then home and sleep. It's pretty dull. So tonight's subject revolves around, I was trying to pick out, we wanted to talk about some drivers, and it's, you know, very difficult to try and pick out drivers you want to talk about without any kind of, well, should we talk about the ones who've got the most championships, or should we do this, should we do that? And I thought back to when I started hot rod racing, which was in 1996, and I've managed to qualify for that world final. I sat on that grid, and I look back at the people who were on that grid with me, and I think, God, you know, like the depth. We talk about the depth of talent there is now, which is phenomenal. But back in 96, it wasn't really dissimilar. So I thought we'll start with that race. We won't talk about the race necessarily, although we can. But I just want to pick out some of the drivers in that race and basically just discuss, you know, what's their lasting sort of legacy? What were they known for? What made them stand out? What were their strengths? What were their weaknesses? You know, of our opinion, really. And I'm sure we'll all have different opinions on it, or maybe all the same. But I wanted just to pick some names not quite out of a hat. I've looked at this today and thought, okay, who do we not talk about? Who do we talk about, etc. I am going to start with a really obvious one, because I've got a great little story about him, and he's arguably because I'm sure there's many fans out there who can argue till the cows come home on who's the best hot rod driver of all time. But someone who's definitely up there for the argument is, of course, the winner that year, Ormand Christie. So, Brian, what's your sort of first thoughts on Ormand Christie? What's the first thing that comes to your head?
Well, an utter legend, and arguably one of the greatest drivers that ever came into national hot rods. And of course, he's the man who started it all with hybrids, because of course he discovered that the Toyota Starlet was going to work, and he brought that out that must have been about 80, I think it was 81, and won the world title with it, and then went on to great success. And I think my main thought is him as somebody who is incredibly resourceful, because you look at that 96 race, and he had a car that cost probably less than most of the other drivers' engines on the grid, and he made it work. And there were some incredible things that happened on that particular weekend, which I dare say we'll come to at some point or the other. But what he turned up with and the way he made that car work in that particular race was just a great demonstration of what an innovator he was in our sport.
What about you, Gary?
Yeah, I think obviously the hybrid goes back to when he started with the Spitfire and the Colt before. He was always trying something new and going against the grain. And I remember when he turned up in the early 80s, when we was all like, drivers from Northern Ireland were pretty much a rare thing. And he was just so quick, you know, like every time he would seem to be the lap times, there was no one that can get anywhere close to him. And that race, it's so like I did watch it the other day, and it's like I remembered that I was thinking like he was almost side by side 3 laps before the end, but it was like halfway of the last lap before he even made his move. It's just it's amazing. It's like I don't know, certain drivers just so comfortable on the outside, and I think he was known very much for them hot laps, just for making that look easy, because he never looked like the car was out of control. It was like. I don't know, you know, my childhood heroes, Barry, George, Duffy, you know, they tend to be a lot of sideways stuff going and, you know, revving mid-corner or whatever, whereas like Ormand was just seamless, really. You know,
I think you're right, because he was, to be fair, I was 96, I was 17 or whatever, and because I'm very young. And he was kind of almost... argue, you know, should have been the end of his career, because you know he was an old timer, really. He'd been around since my dad's era, and then he turns up and sticks it on pole. And
can I just add something to all that? He stuck it on pole. The engine was a wet sump engine, and they went away on the Saturday night and converted it to dry sump because they realised it was burning oil quicker than there was going to burn more oil than would last for a 75 lap race. And they worked through the night in a car park somewhere. I remember talking to Ormand. He turned up less than an hour before the world final was due to start. And he said, I paid for bed and breakfast and I only had breakfast. And he said 75 laps is the last thing I feel like doing at the moment. And, you know, that says something about him, the kind of driver he was. The other thing that struck me, I was thinking about this yesterday, was he didn't actually lead any laps during that world final. The first time he took the lead was out of the final corner on the final lap. I don't think he was recorded as the leader at any point, including going into the last lap. And that just says a lot about the kind of driver he was and how innovative and how he would make things stretch to go the distance.
So who did he overtake on the last lap? Who was he fighting with?
It was Donut. It was a great race, because we had, you know, we're going to get to some of the other drivers shortly, but I think Ricky led, Dave Longhurst, Wolsey was in the mix, and it was like, I think it was, again, going from memory, it was like, I thought Donut was about sort of over halfway before he took the lead, but he was in the lead, I think, for about lap 10 or 15, and
he
really
all the way.
And I think that was a brand new car out that day. I think
it was
still a stock for a driver. It was his first world final. So it was a little bit of a, he wasn't, you know, obviously he was quite big in the stock rods at the time, but I don't think anyone fancied that Donut was going to win, but he looked under control a couple of times. That Ormand got underneath him slightly, but he just seemed to back off and bide his time. But I mean, talk about leave it late, you know, it was amazing.
One other thing about Ormand was it was his first time on the world final grid in 6 years, and 3 months earlier he'd had a heart attack. And I mean, and it was a kind of a rich versus poor, because Donut had the absolute latest spec Evo 2 SHP Peugeot. And it was the all single order. And I'm certainly not belittling Donut's skills, because he is an amazing driver and should have won possibly 2 world titles by now. But, you know, that was state-of-the-art car versus something that probably would be described as a shed, which was on pole position.
The only thing I would say...
That shed's still going, isn't it? That shed's still going.
Well, the outside bit is.
The thing I would say, though, is that car became the template, didn't it, for everything going forward, to my knowledge. That was the template. Yeah, that was a template. Not the suspension, but the chassis was kind of the Vauxhall Tigra template. Am I wrong? Or that was my thoughts on it.
I mean, the Autocross Fiesta was being run by Jeff Simpson, Colin White, Dave Longhurst. This one, if I'm correct, was built from spare parts and was something quite different. Now, I stand to be corrected on that, but I believe that the car that Christie was driving, the Fiesta that he was running, was not anywhere near what the likes of Longham and Simpson were running. It was an absolute budget machine with a budget engine.
Yeah, well,
and he smashed the track record. Yeah,
my dad always said that he used to turn up with some weird looking things, that looked like they were straight from the scrapyard, but they always went fast,
and they probably were.
Yeah, but when John Christie, who's I'm a big fan of, and a great driver, when he's going fast, he's silky smooth as well, and really progressive on the throttle and everything, and really just gentle with the car. But when he won the world final, he had the suspension that his dad had basically told him how to put that weird suspension on that torsion bar suspension, and he went out and won the world final. It's crazy.
Could you imagine how good Ormand Christie would have been in a decent car? Like if he had sort of spent some money, like some of the top spec cars, he could have won 10 world finals. Like you said, he won 5 world finals, was it? And he went
5
missing for a lot of years. He wasn't on the grid. So, I think it's, like I say, it's the debate on who's the best of all time is a bit of one that we could talk forever. But
and just to say, to prove it wasn't a fluke, of course, he came back the following year and did it again, didn't he?
Yeah.
In the same car.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So I'm going to finish off on Ormand now, because we could talk for hours on Ormand, and I'm thinking, okay, let's
yes.
And by all means, we could do a legends off. We could take all the legends and go, right, okay. So that would be a big vote, wouldn't it? That we put on the website one day. But my story of Ormand, because I basically had never really spoke to in my life. I just, sort of in '96, I did that one championship race, and I'd only been around for a little while. So I didn't really get to speak to him, or, I didn't really speak to anyone. I was a sort of shy kid at the time. And then obviously since I've been back, he's not been around. Unfortunately, obviously passed away. Was it last year or?
It was the year before.
Yeah. But prior to that, so I'd never spoke to him. And at the British Championship in 2018, I was second on the grid, and I got past Adam Hylands on the lap 1, and I led the whole race until I totally screwed it up on the second to last corner. So on the last lap, lost concentration. There was some back markers. It was totally my fault. I screwed it up, and Adam just fired it down the inside and won the race, whilst I went spinning on the grass, which was all my own doing, I'll add. And so those who know me know that I'm not a very good loser. So this is about the ultimate.
I don't know what you made.
This is the ultimate shameful. I was beside myself. Anyway, so I drove back to the pits, which I managed to do sensibly. And then I got out of the car and just went straight into the back of the trailer, which is all enclosed and dark, and just sat there. And Ormand came in. Ormand appeared out of nowhere and came over, came into the back of the trailer, which was wasn't like inviting. He made a point coming back in, came into the trailer, shook my hand and said, I'm Ormand Christie, as though I didn't know who he was. And he said, and he just basically patted me on the shoulder and said, look, I know it's hurting, don't worry about it, it's fine. And he just sat there talking at me for about 5 minutes.
Brilliant. And
by the end of it, I was like, well, I'm cool with it now. I almost sort of came out thinking, that's mega, as in that was it was a mega race.
Yeah.
I don't like losing, but it was still it was one of those races that I've had a few really good races that I can really remember and talk about. And they're not the ones that I win. They're normally the ones you don't win, which that's maybe just because I lose a lot more than I win. But it was that. And that was my memory of Ormand will always be that moment of my total and utter
amazing
devastation.
What a memory.
Myself.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. A gentleman as well as a great driver, and a brave man to talk to you after that event as well. You know?
Yes.
And we weren't like mates or anything. I'd never spoke to him before. I probably said hello, but I'd never really spoke to him or anything. And for him to come and do that, I thought, that for me, that's done. That's signed off. That's the person he is in my mind. And the rest of it, yes, I know he was amazingly fast, unbelievable, but I thought that was even better. So next one, Ricky Hunn. We'll start with Gary this time.
Yeah, Ricky, the first I remember him arena back in the late 80s, and he was racing Group mid 80s, was racing the Group A's. I think before that was the Anglia Hot Rods. And my uncle Paul was racing that arena at the time and was the pretty much the quickest around there. And Ricky was all over it. He was like always looking in the car, and you could see that he was going to be the next one. And he was like, he went out. I think he sort of had again pretty much a basic starlet. I mean, it might have something to do with George Polly when he went out there a little bit, but he was so quick from the off and always round the outside. He was like the entertainer of PRI, and again, like PRI was pretty much nowhere near in the big league, but he would then turn up, along with John Stewart, another one in a race, and started taking on the big boys, and of course, he eventually became a world champion. And again, only won it once, but he came close many times.
About you, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Ricky he went to the Win It or Bin It School of Racing, and my memories of him especially are Wimbledon, the winter meetings we used to have, and it was probably early 90s, I should think, and he used to spend the whole of the meeting on the outside line. He always ended up in a post somewhere, and they'd rebuild the car, have it out for the final, even though ripped all the wheels off it, always around the outside. He used to be one of the reasons that I would drive from Dorset, where I was living at the time, to Wimbledon late on a Sunday night, because he was spectacular under the lights. And he won the world title in '94. And it was probably the one year that he really wasn't the favourite and wasn't really trying. And there's quite a few other drivers that probably could learn a few lessons from that, really. And he almost lucked into it in '94, having been the pre-race favourite in years leading up to it. Probably should have had more than one world title, I should think. And around the outside, that's my memory of Ricky.
Yeah, I'm similar.
Sorry, Ricky's post at Wimbledon was infamous, but I think there was quite a few posts he actually clipped on the way, and I always think when you see drivers like him or George around the outside, and Shane, you might be able to tell us, do you set the car up differently to run around the outside, or is it just it's the same? It's just you that's putting it out there.
If you could purposely set the car up to do, if you were that good at setting a car up, then you would for certain scenarios. What typically is the case that unless you're one of these drivers that can go around any track, which I can't really think of anyone at the moment other than probably Rob McDonald, in truth, that can go around any track, anytime, anywhere, and be the fastest. I know for me, if I go on a Wimbledon track, Yarmouth, Mendips, any of those kind of tracks, I can stick it on the outside and I can get around the outside and I can plow on. And because I have the confidence, because the car works for me around those tracks, but equally put me at Ipswich and, I'm hardly ever on the outside because I just can't. I literally have to drive one line round the track to get any kind of speed. I can't change lines. I can't do anything. It's immensely frustrating. If I could set the car up so I didn't have to do that, I would. But I can't. and I'm hoping with a change of car that, you know, I can. But that why I used to, Ricky was a massive inspiration to me because he was there sort of at the end of my dad racing. So my dad spent a couple of years with the 205, struggling really for his kind of ability. He very much went his own path with the car and tried to set it up like a Ford Escort Mark II, and he didn't really respond very well. But he was hell bent on trying to make it, and occasionally it did work, but it was so random. But Ricky he just like round Hensford, he'd just go into he'd be almost backing it into the corner, you know, and you'd think, how's he going? He's almost sideways the whole lap. He's faster than anyone else. He's much faster than anyone else, and it keeps going and going and going. And I think also at the time, the tyres we were running then, you could wring its neck. And actually, when I got in my car, I'm like, right, I want it to handle like Ricky's, you know. And actually, Sonny helped me a little bit because Sonny used to look after Ricky's car. And Sonny did help me a little bit. And sure enough, once I got the car feeling like what Ricky Hunn's car looked like, it was brilliant for me to drive. And it was so much fun. But yeah, he was just relentless, you know, I guess like you said, anywhere you go, fast, round the outside, no quarter given, like just flat out. And it's those drivers that people that turn up to watch, isn't it? And he was
every
classic
time
for that.
And he made you want to actually go and watch the racing, because him ran Wimbledon on the outside line in the wet sometimes, and you knew he was going to take a post at some point or the other, but he'd win the rest of the time, and it was always spectacular. On the sorry, can I just going to say this complete tangent. You said a bit earlier about Speedworth TV. I haven't been asked to say this. I was watching today. I go on the treadmill, and to occupy myself, I watch Speedworth TV. And at the moment, there's the 1989 BP night up there, and it's got Duffy coming from the back of the grid in the BP final round the outside. And if you want to see a driver going round the outside at Wimbledon, it's on Speedworth TV for a couple of weeks, I think. It is epic. I almost fell off the treadmill watching it. It was spectacular. Anyway, sorry, back to Ricky. It just made me think of it.
Yeah, I think a night of talking about Wimbledon, we'll have to do that one time, because how many great races was there, you know? And even when we were there the last time, it was that was a really entertaining race, you know? And
my favourite track.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, my favourite track is, you know, it's magic. You know, the funny thing, my dad hated the place. You know, he didn't like the whole, I think as much going into London on a Sunday was not his thing. And he didn't like little tracks like that. He liked Hensford, you know. He didn't like those sort of tracks such as that. He liked Hensford, or he liked a proper shale track, but not sort of a bit of both, which really Wimbledon was. But it was so perfect for me. It felt special because I knew we were going somewhere that wasn't going to be there forever. And the fact that it was sort of derelict as well kind of actually added something for me, because it was like there's ghosts there. And the fact that if you crashed, it's game over. You know, it's like the end. You know,
no bouncing off.
You know, in Formula One racing, you know, they get the drivers kind of bring back gravel traps, bring all that kind of stuff, and you think, you know, we think like that, but we're not. We're going, walls. You know, they're a bit soft, aren't they? A wall, a concrete wall, a bit soft. You know, we want a post and wire fence that separates the men from the boys.
That's what we want.
And you think like, and it is that it's our equivalent of that, you know. And whilst they kill the cars, but sometimes you just want to be on that knife edge, because when I was lucky with Wimbledon. I did really well around there, the few rounds I did. And I tell you what, the the feeling you get when you go home, when you've done well around there, is,
I can imagine,
is just
must
different.
be such a buzz. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Okay, right, we're going to move on then.
Going in that tunnel.
Yeah.
Well, that video that you've got that keeps doing the rounds, 25,000 views or something it's had.
Yeah.
It's just magic.
Iconic.
I wish I'd recorded more of those. I really did. You know, it's there's still a few I'll dig out, I'm sure.
Right, okay, we're going to do another one because we've been chomping through the time. I don't want to make it forever, but we'll definitely do one or two more. So my next one, because we want to, by the way, on all this promotion stuff we do, it's all about all the series that we look after. So it's English, Scottish series, Northern Irish, and Irish series. So we're going to talk about everyone. Everyone's going to be included, regardless of whether there's 40 cars or 3 cars. Doesn't matter. So the next one, going down south of Ireland, is Tom Casey, was in that race. Brian.
Tom Casey, wow. Well, he was somebody who was a bit of a dab hand at the engine building, wasn't he? Another nearly man. He came so close to winning on several occasions. Exciting to watch. For me, I often felt as though maybe car preparation wasn't quite at the level of some and often let him down. Maybe I'm doing him an injustice, I don't know. Unfulfilled potential, I'd probably say, for Tom Casey. Probably should have done an awful lot more, and never really, I don't think he lifted any major titles, did he? Don't think he did.
You can always go to the nationalhotrod.com website and check out the Roll of Honour. Just if
I might have to do that in a second to check.
I think he came the closest when he was driving the Focus as well, which wasn't necessarily the best of cars, but he had that going well, and he did come close in the world. But yeah, a real character off the track, and yes. I think also I love watching the excitement he gets watching his son race. You know, like David, and that is like what you said about unfulfilled potential. I think Dave's going to sort of maybe feel that potential that Tom missed out on. You know, I think he won a British a couple of years ago, and he'll certainly. I think there's a world in him, you know, which would be great to see. And it's. I mean, the fathers and sons, you know, obviously Shane very much comes from that. It's so nice to have all these next second, third generation drivers keep coming through. And, you know, like, so from that 25 years ago, 96, it's crazy, isn't it? You know, like, it's, where did that time go?
Can you believe that 96, sorry.
I had curtains.
I remember the curtains. I remember them. The 96 World Final was 25 years ago, and it was the 25th staging of the World Final as well. Does that make you feel really old now, Gary?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's a shame that we sort of like, you know, missed a year. So, you know, we want sort of the 50th is going to be a big celebration, but it
really is.
Yeah, and that's so weird, as in not racing and like missing a year. It was just like, I know like some of you guys, you know, raced, but I didn't. It was the first year I've missed racing probably since I was about 3 or 4, and not to be on that. You know, you always know where you are come what July, so I'm sure we'll be there this year. But you're Shane, that was obviously, you said, because you disappeared after that race and you didn't carry on for much longer after that World Final?
No, you know, my dream was to, you know, make a living from motor racing, and, you know, I knew I couldn't do that with National Hot Rods. So Kevin Clark invited me to drive a Eurocar, to have a go in one. So I dressed up as Kevin Clark one day at Mallory, where I didn't have a license. I was too young. It was all a bit, but I didn't know what I was doing. And he's like, "Oh, you'll be fine. Off you go." And that was like one day. Then, you know, a week later, let's go to Mallory again. And then a brand new car turns up with my name on it. I'm like, "Oh, it's got my name on it." And he's like, "Oh, do you want it next year?" Dad, you know. And Kevin, Kevin had a sponsor, and they basically paid for the racing. It was like unbelievable. And so that I went down that road and tried to do that sort of stuff. But the only thing I'm going to say on that, because I don't want to talk about me really, but the only thing I was going to say on that is whatever I was ever going to achieve, I was always coming back to National Hot Rods, because as soon as I went circuit racing, everything got easier. Everything. Eurocar was hard, but easier than Nationals. And then you go to like GT racing, and if you're in the right car, it's just a case of keeping it on the track, and that's a bit unjust, but you just need to be fast in hot rod racing. Who cares if you're fast? You're not going to win races if you're fast, not necessarily, because that's just like one element. You need to be fast. You need to be able to overtake. You need to be able to stay out of trouble. You need luck. You need so many things. There's no run of the mill, and it's actually that's the challenge. But my Tom Casey thing really is that he was just nuts. He was like, he was just his son is kind of a perfect balance. He's got that wild side. He's got the speed, but in a long race, he's always there at the end, and that's And for a driver who's a little bit more wild, that's not normally what you get. It's normally, first 20 laps, great, and then you've got no tyres, no this. But I do think he will win, and I think it'll come late because a little bit like Ricky, where Ricky just, should have won that world final so many times and absolutely annihilated it for years, but never won it. And I remember that world final he won it, and we were there. Dad was racing in it, and he was I think he was fourth or something. And he's just like hanging on for dear life. And there was Phil White and probably Woolsey and another Andy Stewart, probably something like that. And it all kicked off at the end. I think it might have been Simpson, but it all kicked off at the end, and he just went straight for the outside, went round all of them, and won the race. And he was off the pace, But just one of those things that sometimes it happens with those kind of people where they've got all the ingredients apart from a bit of luck at the end. And then the year when, where they weren't anywhere. I'd say the same a little bit about Gary Woolsey when he won that national in 2015 was a little bit like that. It was kind of, where have you come from? But you don't not deserve it, because there's plenty of times where it hasn't gone your way, but suddenly everything opens up. And my dad always says that in 79, he was when he won the national, he said he was nowhere, but he said every time they kept yellow flags, kept stopping the race, and every time they stopped the race, he's three places ahead, or he's gained everything just fell into his lap. And he said just sometimes those things happen. I've never seen it myself. I wish it just happened
it's
like
the
that.
only one that's never recorded. I think it's the only world final that none of us will ever get to see a recording of, because I think there was a strike that year, wasn't there? And it never got recorded, which is a tragedy, really.
There is a sort of there is one on YouTube that's kind of recorded from where the mechanics used to sit, where we used to get huddled. Yeah, we used to get huddled.
Really?
Yeah, if you type it in, you can see it, and someone's videoing it.
Yeah,
from where the mechanics used to stand, which was basically behind the bike shed, behind the the
speedway bits.
Yeah. That was mega. The atmosphere there was good. Even in the early 90s when you were still able to stand there. But okay, we're going to go. I think we should do one more, because we've been chomping at it for a while, and people are getting bored, no doubt. But
no.
for the final one, we're going on a big one, because I've got lots of memories of this guy, Jeff Simpson, Gary.
Yeah, definitely one of the ones that you could say, you know, how did he not win a world? Really, it's the best driver ever to win a world, possibly. You know, there's others, obviously Pete Stevens, Stu Jackson come to mind quickly, but yeah, through that era of the 90s, because I think there was a sort of period where we struggled with cars for a little while, but himself and Skittimore, they were like in there week in, week out, always running at the front. You know, he went on a couple of years later to have some great battles with Colin White as well, which has sort of become quite infamous. And again, my early memories of him was probably back from Wimbledon in the stock rod days when they used to have lights in them still. You know, they used to sort of more or less straight off the street, you know, and he was the main player out there. Still very much, you know, at most meetings, looking fantastic these days. And the new Slim Jim, you know, Slim Jeff. And he's... yeah, of course, his son did pretty well as well. But and again, like his son, there's another one that when Matt's been racing, you think like he's going to win a world, but hasn't yet. Maybe, you know, maybe he'll be back. But yeah, no, Jeff, and a great character off the track, you know, and he's very supportive of everyone as well. And like I said, the NHRPA in them early days, he did so much work for them, and yeah, a real character, great bloke.
Yeah, I would say that Jeff is a classic example of somebody not winning a world final because they try too hard. And I mean, I did a little bit of I would say journalism. I used to write for Short Circuit magazine, and my first ever interview was with Jeff Simpson. I actually went round his house in 1989 and did an interview with him for Short Circuit magazine, and it was, he had so much passion and so much desire to win the Hot Rod World Final, National Hot Rod World Final. He would have given anything for that, and I think he used to psych himself up so much. He'd take a week off work to prepare for it. He'd build a car especially for it, and it always used to be the number of times he'd come so close to winning it or being a contender, and something would get in the way. And there always used to be that sense that he was trying too hard. And it was like Ricky. The moment Ricky stopped trying, he actually won it. And I always felt that with Jeff. And maybe he'll correct me on that. But and to a degree, maybe with Matt as well, that it was their number one passion out of anything was to win the world final, and in a way that was their greatest obstacle.
I agree, and I think that's sort of, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. With Jeff, it was, and still to this day, you know, he'd jump back. If I said, you know, Jeff, I need you to jump in the car and race in this race, he would get in that car and he'd get in it and go, right, I'm going to win it. You know, he would, because he loves it. You know, the fact that, you know, he turns up to every race meeting, and it, you know, and I agree. I think, and to be honest, firsthand, because I'm like that. You know, like winning that world final to me is the most, other than family, is the most important achievement I can ever. You know, to be honest, that's been my goal since I can remember any kind of being alive, sort of thing. And and I think, and as much as you go, oh, whatever, you know, it's just lie. You're just lying to yourself. I know what I'm like, and you know, it is what it is. But I think with Jeff, and the other thing I loved about Jeff in this, you know, when we were back into hot rods with Dad in 92-ish, is I know I went to was it 91 when Roger Peck won?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which that was the first hot rod race meeting I'd ever been to, by the way, and wow, like if you're going to
first one,
if you want to get obsessed by a sport that you'd already thought was good, watch that race. But I think in that one, I think there was two cars that stood out for me, and one was Roger Peck because of the colour scheme. I just loved it. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then he went and won it, like in style. But also, I think that's the year when Jeff had, like, he had a Starlet with like it had loads of grey on it, and it had like a Formula 2 stock car style roof fin. You know,
he built that for
wheels.
one job, to win the world. He built that car for that job.
Black wheels. Simpson.
He's another innovator, wasn't he, as well? Yeah.
And actually,
he was always trying.
What I would say also on that innovator thing, because he used to turn up with the poshest bus transporter, should I say? And there's always like an air that he's spending tons of money, which was probably the case, but because he enjoyed going to the racing and doing all that. And actually, yes, he used to build these amazing cars, but he was the one who introduced the Vauxhall. He basically ducked out of half a season or maybe more of racing at the cutting edge of hot rod racing to try and reduce costs. And that was because at the time it was, we had to basically the only engine you could win with, it was the Peugeot, which was at the time I think it was about £12,000 to £15,000 to get one built. And he brought out this, look, these you can run these, you can build these for £6,000, and they're basically the same speed, but he wasn't allowed to get points or anything like that. And of course now it's still going, and even now you can only spend, I think from what I know, Boardley's like the sort of high end of the price range, and that's about £12,000 for one of those engines. You think this is like 25 years on?
Simpson's legacy in that was that when the Vauxhall 16 valve was brought into the rules officially, I remember the grids absolutely rocketing. Suddenly we had cars right, left and centre, and it totally brought national hot rods back up again. And then he did it again with developing the Colt. Do you remember when he was the one who brought the Mitsubishi Colt? And I remember watching him around Ringwood testing it without even a body kit on it. The body kit hadn't been finished and he was just testing the frame, but all the while innovating and pushing forwards. But that Vauxhall engine was responsible for a massive increase in the grid. So I remember at the time, I remember being so excited because as a result of that, you had the likes of Andy Stewart, who could then come into nationals, and Ian McKellar came in at about that time, and Graham White and numerous others, because suddenly it was affordable and achievable.
Absolutely. It really enriched the whole formula, because it went from being completely elitist really to, like you say, and even now, the guys I speak to, it's really, I think we mentioned it last week with Sean Taylor, is that it's just the bodywork damage is the big cost to national hot rods, because you can go through panels. I know about that. Even though individually they're not actually that expensive, but if you go through them often enough, and you've got to paint them, you've got to stick some stickers on it, all that kind of stuff. But I think that's sort of a slightly misunderstood thing, I think, about Jeff, actually, because I think a lot of people look back and go, he used to, money was no object. He could throw tyres at it, throw anything at it. He'd always have a new car. But, it's hard, actually, the new car, because, and we're innovating. It's not like he could go and, put traction control on, or there wasn't really, it was just about doing things differently. You're still working with metal, welder, basic tools, but trying to make them work better or different. And that's obviously what he got his buzz from doing. And I think you're right. I think, absolutely should have won the world final, but there's a few people who should have won it, I guess, as well. Right. Okay. Right.
That was in that race. I was sort of surprised that when I watched it again the other day, and he actually finished fourth, was Dick Hillard, who I think at the time they announced that he was actually retiring after so many years in the sport, And of course, 25 years later, he's still with us. So that's another great, again, he hasn't won the world yet. Maybe he will, but he's been in plenty of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have got, because I think we should wrap it up, because this is not the end of exclusively talking about all those drivers in there. And I agree, because I was looking through the list going, well, there's plenty of standouts, but you look at Dick Hillard, Colin Smith, both in that race. And Colin finished 5th. Where'd you say Dick finished?
He finished 4th.
Yeah. So you've got 2 guys there. I mean, Dick's been doing it since World War II, hasn't he?
Chariot racing.
And he looks the same. He's got the same terrible hair that he had. Do you think he just came like that? He was like his Dick Hillard, the baby, and he had that hair just going on. But anyway, thanks, guys. And
thank you.
We'll work out what we're going to do next week, and we'll definitely have something back next week, and we'll have a little chat amongst ourselves. But if you've enjoyed this and you've managed to stick for virtually a whole hour, thank you very much. Do the liking, the subscribing, the thanking, and no slagging would be good. And thanks, guys. Take it easy. I'm going to press stop.
Cheers, Brian.
Cheers, mate.
Good night,
Cheers. See ya. Bye-bye.